Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Drax Dupre. We're on a summer break between season 2 and 3, which will start sometime in August. Joe is hiding from the sun somewhere, as am I. Not one for hot temperature, let me tell you. Also not one for seasonal allergies that I still have a little bit since the teenage days. Anyway, today a little experiment. I'm working on a new Drax Files World Makers video that is also out in mid-August about digital ethnographer Tom Bölsdorf, who was on the show before with a long interview. He's the author of many, many books. One being the book Coming of Age in Second Life that came out in 2008. So we're filming with Tom in real life in Orange County this Sunday. Exciting stuff, but I can't tell you about the visual concept yet. But what I will be doing, I have conducted an initial interview that's usually about 2 hours with the video series. And I narrowed it down. I whittled it down to about 15-20 minutes. And that's usually my raw material for the 5-minute video format. And that's a grueling task in of itself and pretty scary too. You never know if it will work out, but I won't bore you. Anyway, today I want to play the 18 or so minute clean interview that serves as my current pool of material to construct the story for the video, uninterrupted, just with a bit of music underneath. Then you, the listener, can perhaps imagine where the video is going. And at this point, it could go in any number of directions, any number of emphases. What's the plural of emphasis? Is there one? So maybe you want to share your preference of emphasis for this story in the comment section. Deal? So crowdsourcing production, it is not quite, but I guess it's a new form of transparency. Usually I don't disclose that early in the process what the next guest will be, but I think this is kind of exciting. And I hope that it may encourage folks to do similar things, tell stories about Second Life in this fashion via machinima, kind of like the What Second Life Means to Me series that Ziola Linden started, which is still going strong. It's amazing what people submit. But it could be, how about you go around the grid and you ask the question to other people, what does Second Life mean to you? And then you put a machinima together and become a direct competitor of the Drax Files. No, don't do that. I want to be the only one. I'm just kidding. So, a couple of housekeeping notes real quick. You can get in touch with us. Ping the show's Avatar Drax Files. Send us news scoops, press releases. radio@draxfiles.com is the email address. On Skype, you can leave a voicemail anytime on the Drax Files. You can become a sponsor. You can have your own banners displayed on the website, mentioned every single show. We have a ton new sponsors, all at the very end. Listen to them, go shopping with them. And you can also become an individual subscriber for $100 per month. We'll send you the subscription device from Chris Lehman from Botanical. So now on to Tom, professor at the University of Irvine. 18 minutes, what did I say? Well, you'll see. Coming down from a 2-hour raw interview, stream of consciousness, raw material for Drax Files episode 31.
My name in Second Life is Tom Bukowski. I'm a professor in the Department of Anthropology at the University of California, Irvine. And in Second Life, I am a digital ethnographer. An ethnographer is someone who studies culture, how people live and think and what they do. You spend time with people, you do what's called participant observation, hanging out with them, you interview them, you do all these kinds of things, you look at archives, and then you write about them. Within a few days of going into Second Life, this sort of light bulb went off in my head. What if I take those same methods and same approaches that ethnographers use when they study a physical world community and try it in Second Life? At that point, I had already been doing research in Indonesia for more than 10 years. I knew how to do ethnographic research very well. When I was just out of college, I started traveling to Indonesia. That's what convinced me eventually to pursue a PhD in anthropology, which I did at Stanford, studying gay and lesbian Indonesians for my dissertation. I wrote 2 books about that research. When I started, Second Life only had 2,500 members, and the maximum number of people in the world at any one time was about 200. I mean, when I started, I decided that I would, with my avatar, fly over all of Second Life. Every single building, I would fly over everything, and just to see what people had done. And it took me 1 week to do it, about maybe 2 hours a day. Imagine trying to do that now, or even a year later, it would have been impossible. What I saw happening in Second Life was people interacting a lot like I would see them do in Indonesia, hanging out at a shopping mall, sitting around talking, going to a dance, making stuff. As an ethnographer, trying to use the same methods that I would use in Indonesia, it's different than just interviewing people in isolation. You're trying to participate and observe at the same time. Someone might tell you that they're atheist, and then you're driving with them to the store, and you run a red light, and they say a little prayer, and you say, well, I thought you told me you were atheist. And then they might say, well, yes, but you know, it's complicated, and why not? You get all of this rich information. Part of what your research process is to see how people are reacting to you. You're not trying to pretend you're not there. You're trying to be self-aware of how you're influencing what you're seeing. I have a house in Second Life called Ethnographia. I would do interviews, focus groups. Every week I would have what was called the Digital Cultures Chat, where I would have a topic every week like the body or time or money. Anyone who wanted to could teleport in and we would chat, and that would all be data. It was just fascinating. And you know, anthropologists don't just study China and India. We don't just go to New York City and Berlin and Tokyo. We go to little villages. From studying a small community, we can learn incredibly important things that can tell you about the realm of possibility for human experience. My original research in Second Life appeared in my book, Coming of Age in Second Life, An Anthropologist Explores the Virtually Human. That was first published in 2008. And then I wrote another book with 3 colleagues called Ethnography in Virtual Worlds, A Handbook of Method. And that book came out in 2012. The thing that really stuck out for me from doing the research is that virtual worlds, the thing that is special about them, that is different than a website, that's different than email, is that they are places. In the English language, this shows up very nicely in that people will say you go on CNN.com, but you go in Second Life. That's the thing that is different about virtual worlds compared to a social network site like Facebook or something like that. Places could be text only, right? The early virtual worlds were just text, all text, but they were still places because they would persist after you would log off, and there would be a chat room, right, that would still be there after you log back on. Nowadays, they mostly have these beautiful graphics. But the important thing is that they are places. And for a lot of people, they are places of play. For a lot of people, they are places of fantasy. But that's still very different from saying it's a game. And that distinction is so important if we're going to do good research on virtual worlds. Because if we don't have that in mind, then we bias our thinking by assuming everything that we see is a game. What about building my house for doing interviews and my research? It's fun to do, building is fun, but not everything fun is a game. You know, in terms of our own common sense, the work that we need to do on ourselves as researchers before we study other people, we have to think about our own assumptions. If we don't think them through carefully, it really is going to bias what we do and what we see. You never use deception in ethnographic research. If you look at my profile, it says I'm an anthropologist studying Second Life. People's screen names are real to them. They might have a business based on it. They might have friendships or a partner. And so in my research, I do not only anonymize their physical world names, I anonymize their screen names as well, because you would expose people. When people have an anonymous name, it is not necessarily for the purpose of deception. There can be many reasons why people might want to have a name that isn't tied to their physical world identity. There are people who are thinking about changing their gender without having to let the people around them know, just to find out if it feels right. I've had persons who were experimenting with that or thinking that through in Second Life tell me that their avatar body, if they were born male, let's say, and they had an avatar body that they were trying out as being female, would sometimes say that avatar body to me is more real than my physical body. And that realizing that's the real me has been incredibly liberating. I know people with disabilities saying that they find sometimes going into Second Life is a way to learn how able-bodied people interact, because they aren't treating them as disabled when they meet them, because they don't see that the person has a wheelchair. In the era of big data that Facebook and Google and other folks are using, where they're making money off of knowing everything about you and selling that, Second Life has gone from being behind the times to being sort of cutting edge again in a Edward Snowden era, where now the idea of an alternative to that model of, in order to participate in the internet, you must give up every last shred of your privacy and every last detail of your health data. Things like Second Life offer a model of participation that in some ways is closer to the Apple model. That the way Apple makes money from you is that you buy an iPhone. They don't care so much about selling all of the data. I've come to realize that the number one problem in the study of technology is the tendency for people to call the physical world real life or the real world, as opposed to stuff that's online. First of all, a lot of stuff that happens online is real. If I learn German online, I could use that when I go to Berlin. If I gamble online and lose money, that money is gone. The conversation we're having right now is real. You can make a documentary from it. When people talk about Second Life versus real life or the real world, the assumption that contains is that everything physical is real. Some stuff in the physical world absolutely, obviously is real. If you get in a car wreck and you die, that's real. But some things in the physical world aren't real. You can read a novel, in the physical world. You can act Shakespeare. You can act in a play. So part of what I'm very interested in the research I'm doing is what makes things real, online or offline. If I become your friend in Second Life, that is real, even if we never meet in the physical world. But that doesn't mean that the relationship is any less real. It's interesting. Most people, when they say real life or something isn't real, what they usually mean either, number one, is that it's fantasy or role-playing, or number two, that it's anonymous and they're using it as a way of saying anonymous, or number three, that it doesn't have big consequences for them, like they don't have a lot of money invested or something like that. And since Aristotle, philosophers and people for thousands of years have debated that question. What is the meaning of the word real? And I wish I had the answer to it. I don't. But what I do know is that virtual worlds like Second Life give us a wonderful way to think in new, fresh ways about that question. So for me as an anthropologist, because I'm not a philosopher, I'm less interested in sort of making a claim as to the one definition of what real is. I'm more interested in how are people out there talking about it. If you are an ethnographer, the challenge is time. Learning a culture is like learning a language. The key thing about participant observation is that you are allowing people to get to know you. You can't rush it. You can't build trust overnight. I once had a group of students tell me that they had tried to do research in Second Life, ethnographic research, and they failed and they thought it couldn't be done. And I asked them what they had done, and they said, well, they went into Second Life and they teleported into one of the big shopping centers and they tried to interview people and no one would talk to them. And I said, well, in Berlin or Los Angeles, if you just walked up to someone on the street in a shopping mall and said, I want to interview you about your thoughts and feelings, no one would want to talk to you either. What we're trying to do is see things through someone else's eyes and understand why this is interesting to them. An important sort of tip for ethnography is just slow down in rushing to judgment. Slow down before you assume that, because you don't like something means that no one should like it. In the last few years, as I've been working with people with different kinds of disabilities in Second Life, I got to know Fran and Barbie. Fran has Parkinson's disease and is active with a community of people with Parkinson's disease in Second Life. Barbie, who is her daughter, is also very active in this group, Creations for Parkinson's. And they do a lot of inspirational work with their group. In a lot of research that people do that's statistically based, you want to avoid outliers because it's not the norm. But for an anthropologist, if it's a way that people are living a life, there's something to be learned from that. And Fran's life is not typical, but no one's life is typical. Fran is in her late 80s. And that is unusual to be so active in a virtual world and to be so fearless in using it. And one of the many wonderful things that her story teaches us is that virtual worlds can offer something to people who have issues with mobility or getting out of the house. They can interact with people in Second Life and do things together, not just send a letter or an email, but go horseback riding, play bumper cars, or go shopping, or do all kinds of activities together. And that can create social interaction that can be meaningful because you're not just talking about something that you've done elsewhere, you're doing something in world with other people. It's been interesting to see what the reception of my book and my work has been to anthropologists in general. It shows that anthropology has value to study anything, that we aren't just limited to studying villages in a rice field. If we can do it in Second Life, we can do it anywhere, that kind of idea. That is really valuable for getting students interested in ideas and interested in anthropology. For me, as an ethnographer, I can't study the future. I don't have a time machine. But we can make some rough guesses. A big issue is this tendency to assume that what's important is either what's new or what's big. The hype of the tech sector and startup culture, what's going to be the next Pinterest, what's going to be the next Facebook. I will have people say, Second Life is 10 years old. Why are you still studying it? I never have people say, why are you still going to Indonesia? There's a value in studying something over time for two reasons. One, things will change. When I started studying Second Life, it didn't have voice. You couldn't even stream a URL into a parcel. But also, I think especially in the realm of technology, what's just as important is to look at how a lot of things stay the same. Once Second Life got big, it is sort of stabilized in terms of the basic parameters of what it does. And I think that's okay. In the same way that books have to all have scratch and sniff or holograms. That's not how J.K. Rowling made $1 billion from the Harry Potter books. What makes it good is that it's a really good new story using an old format. There's going to be continuing diversification of virtual worlds, some of them bigger, some of them smaller. And for more open-ended virtual worlds like High Fidelity or Second Life, obviously one of the big questions is if the virtual reality stuff ends up sticking, if the virtual reality stuff becomes useful to people, virtual worlds are definitely one of the top things that they would be used for, right? So when people talk about using VR for games, what they're really saying is using it for virtual worlds that are structured as games. They're not talking about it for Tetris, right? But it's not like it's going to take over virtual worlds. It's just one more way of accessing them. With Oculus Rift, or other kinds of goggle things, there might be certain times where that might be a really great thing that could improve my experience of Second Life, but maybe I'm building my house or I'm just talking to someone and I don't want or need that. We also know from the broader study of internet technology that for a lot of people, the most emotional, powerful experiences they have with technology when their husband texts them, "I love you," before they go to bed at night because they're in a different city and it's using SMS, right? So the idea that emotion or meaningfulness correlates with high bandwidth is silly. We really want to stay awake and stay alert so that as these things keep changing and emerging, we really work to make them serve the cause of good as much as possible, to have them be things that do good for the world. And that's in our hands, not the technology's hands.
So that's the end of the show. That was Tom Bölstoff. Share in the comment section of the blog what would you like to emphasize in the video. I have 5 minutes and it has to be a coherent narrative. What are the important points that he makes? What are the less important points that we can leave out or maybe tell visually? That's the stuff I'm wrecking my brain with every single day when I get up. And it changes, and it goes through many, many iterations for the video. The video is obviously a lot different than the podcast in the sense that the podcast stays also archived, but the videos are more really, I'm shooting myself in the foot by saying the videos are thought through and the podcast is not. That's not true. It's a very different format, obviously. I'm not going to bore you with format philosophy. I want to say in closing, if you have been living under a virtual rock for the past week, you missed a meme that started on Twitter because Loki Elliott took a photo of me that was originally taken by Pete Linden when I visited Linden Lab last month. I got a tour of Project Sansar. I'm kind of staring to the ceiling with an Oculus DK2 on, and Loki photoshopped my image into all sorts of backgrounds and then provided the image by itself on an alpha layer, just me, for everyone else. And everyone else went crazy with the hashtag immersive Drax. Flattering and embarrassing at the same time for me. I've never been a subject of a meme. I don't recommend it necessarily. And then Strawberry Singh came along and she put the image on a Prim and SL and offered flat Drax on Marketplace for $0 Linden so everyone could run around the grid with me attached to him or her, or just put the flat me out into the wild and take pictures. In any event, you gotta see it to believe it. Torley submitted a bunch. There's some real creativity out there. Even some outside SL folks participated. The meme seems to be over now, I think, so that's great. I can leave the basement again to go shopping and I won't be recognized. I'm kidding. We didn't even trend on Twitter, obviously. As Loki Elliott put it, we're not tweeting about the royal baby or Bill Cosby. It was fun while it lasted, so take a look at it. I posted a few on the blog. Have a fab weekend, everyone. Have a great weekend, Joe, wherever you are. Visit our sponsors. The updated credits are rolling right now. Bye.
The Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Leap Motion, Stitcher, Fateware by Damien Fate, Giza Creations, Ferocious L, Bright Canopy, Dwarfins, Dutchy, Kona Stream, Eros Avatars, Maven Homes, Bot Girls Identity Circus, Ison, Caravel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Loki Elliott, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Fallen Gods Incorporated, What's Next, Abranimations, Blue Moon Enterprises, Avacon, and Landscapes Unlimited. Contact the show via Skype DraxFiles, Avatar DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.